So I'm going to pass this over to Joel to start. And for those of you who are on your computer and you would like to not just see Joel's lovely punam, you can press gallery view at the top of your computer. We will be keeping him spotlit if you want to just be able to see him. But we also want to make sure that while we are recording this, that we are seeing the person who will be presenting. So I just want to say that this is yet another year of wonderful tribute to a teacher and a friend and a real mentor. And just this is always such a beautiful way of bringing high level education and literature to our community. And I will pass it over to Joel to do the rest of the introductions, but lovely to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi Schatz, and welcome everybody. Full disclosure, this is not an event in and of itself, but this is an event whose purpose is to get you interested or maybe even excited about Yaniv Iczkovits and his incredible book, The Slaughterman's Daughter. There will be, as Rabbi Schatz noted, he will be our speaker at the second annual Baruch Link Scholar in Residence program, which will be during the last weekend of October. So about a month and a half from now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but let me start in with tonight's book review of The Slaughterman's Daughter. I think all book reviewers face the same dilemma, which is, I want to tell you enough about this book to get you interested and maybe even to go read it, but I don't want to tell you too much because then I'm doing too many spoiler alerts and you probably lose interest in reading the book. So that's a dilemma that I think every book reviewer, including those who review for the New York Times Sunday book review or anywhere else, have facing, and I'm facing that myself tonight. I want to tell you a lot about the book. I want to tell you a little bit about the author, although I'm focused more on the book tonight than the author. But I don't want to tell you too much. In fact, a friend of mine who was going to be on tonight said, well, I've already read half the book. I don't want to join because then you'll tell me the rest and I don't want to know how it ends. I will definitely not tell you how this book ends, but I will tell you how it begins, and I will tell you something about some of the characters. So I'm going to tell you a few things before I start describing exactly what happens in this book, but why I think this is such a terrific book. These are the things that stand out in my mind. Number one, the characters. This book has a huge cast of characters. Many of them are fascinating. Many are Jewish, some are not Jewish, some are police, some are Russian army majors, generals, captains. Some you come to love, some you come to hate, but I think virtually all of them you will find to be very, very amusing. So beyond the characters, this book has an amazing up and down and every which way storyline, which goes not in any sense at all in a straight line, but varies from place to place, from thing to thing. And it's really, really an awful lot of fun to follow this storyline. So we've got our characters, we've got our storyline. And the third, and perhaps even most important thing that I like about this book is the writing, the incredibly smooth, wonderful writing, some of which is sarcastic, some of which is humorous, some of which is downright scary. But it's quite wonderful. And as we go through this, I'm going to give you a few examples of the writing itself. This book was written in Hebrew and it's translated into English. Our author, Yaniv Iczkovits, has written 3 novels. This is the only one so far, at least, translated into English, and I could only wish that at some point the others will also be translated, because I would just love to read all of his books because I'm so excited about this one. This book takes place around 1895, towards the end of the 19th century, and it takes place in the Pale of Settlement, where so many of us Ashkenazi Jews have our ancestors. The question that I have in my mind, and the one thing I want to ask Yaniv Iczkovits as soon as I meet him, is How did a modern Israeli writer in the year 2020, 2021, how did he come to write a book about events and characters that took place in 1895? What was his motivation as opposed to writing about Israel or other things that he might know an awful lot more about? And he does credit the history department at the University of Tel Aviv for helping him learn all of this history. It's amazing. So I don't know the answer to that yet, but I'm really glad he did, because it's really an extremely interesting and fun read. So keeping in mind the things that I like the most, which are the characters and the events, the incredibly complex and wonderful and unusual events that take place, and the writing, let's talk a little more about the book. So first, let's talk about some of the characters who I think you will fall in love with, at least some of them. The first character we meet is Mendy Spiceman. Now, Mendy is one of the two sisters who are at the center of the story, although it really is her sister, Fanny, who is much more towards the center of the story. So Mendy Spiceman has a problem. And apparently she was not the only person in this time of Jewish history to have this problem. Her husband up and left her with the kids and went somewhere. She thinks she knows where he went. She's not sure she knows where he went. She's not sure how she could possibly get him back, but she's absolutely miserable. She has a sister, as I mentioned, and her name is Fanny. Fanny is really at the very center of this book. In fact, the title, The Slaughterman's Daughter, that's a definite reference to Fanny. Fanny and Mendy, growing up, were the daughters of a shochet. Now, the Slaughterman's daughter means the person who is the daughter of a shochet. Slaughterman, I think, is not a very gentle, happy, wonderful definition of a shochet, but I guess that was the best he could come up with. You know, you cannot call a shochet a butcher, right? A shochet is not someone who sells meat to the public. A butcher does. What a shochet does is someone who wants to have kosher meat will bring the animal, a cow, a chicken, a turkey, to the shochet. There's a special ritual way in which you cut the animal's throat to conform to halacha. And there's an awful lot about this in the Talmud and in other Jewish sources. And the shochet will cut the animal in the proper way, give it back to whoever brought the animal in, and take his fee. So I guess he didn't want to call it, or the translator didn't want to call it the shochet's daughter, but it's called the slaughterman's daughter. It's a little bit, it doesn't fall triplingly on the tongue, but you can get past that, I think, pretty quickly. Now, these two daughters, Mendy and Fanny, had a very, very different reaction to their father's profession. Mendy was horrified, disgusted, didn't want to have anything to do with being a shochet or seeing what her father did, cutting up the animals. It was a horror. But Fanny really took an interest in it and watched carefully. And she became, at least for a while, a female shochet, which was pretty unusual, especially back in her day. Maybe Rabbi Schatz will comment later on if there's a lot of female shochets today, but at this point, it was very, very unusual, but people actually trusted her kashrut, and people actually bought meat that she herself cut. One of the important points that we can't talk about too much here right now, again, I'm always in this dilemma of how much should I say, how much should I give away? But I will say that her abilities as a shochet become very important as the story goes along. Okay. Mendy's husband has left her, and what does her sister do? The slaughterman's daughter, one night, seeing how miserable her sister is, she decides, I'm going to go find that SOB and I'm going to bring him back to his wife and his children. So she sets out on a journey to find her brother-in-law, who left her sister and the family. And in a lot of ways, she's sort of acting just like her brother-in-law acted, because she sneaks out of the house in the middle of the night. She doesn't leave a note. She doesn't leave any other than to say, I love you. She doesn't tell her husband. She doesn't tell the children, I'm going to go try and find Mendy's husband, and I'll be back soon, or anything like that. She leaves. You could, if you wanted to, compare her a little bit to the husband, Zvi Meir, but I think she obviously feels this is a mitzvah to do what she has to do to make sure that Mendy has a decent life and gets her husband back. Later on in the story, we will see whether that really was a great thing or not to have her husband back. Again, no spoiler alerts, as much as I can possibly help it. And everything that I'm telling you now happens in the early pages of the book. So that I don't think is too much of a spoiler alert. So Fanny decides to go find her brother-in-law and bring him back to his family. There is a former soldier in the Russian army who was actually a little Jewish boy who was kidnapped by the Tsar's workers. Now, kidnapped is actually a little bit of a strange term, because the Tsar's soldiers and policemen would come to every village and say, give us one of your children for the army. And the villagers had to decide who to give, which was a pretty hard decision to make. But the villagers chose this one man. He's the lead character, or at least the lead male character, and his name is Zyzik Breshov. Zyzik Breshov is his Russian name. He was born Yoshka Berkovits in the same town. And as a small child, Yoshka is captured by the Russian soldiers and taken off to the army. He serves for 30 years, and then he comes back. He is not Yoshka Berkowitz anymore. He is Zyzik. Nobody really knows exactly what happened to him or where he was or what he did, but he is back, and he has a little job. There is a river right near the town, and people often have to cross the river to get to their home or to get to another place. And so Zyzik has a rowboat. And Zyzik will take people across the river. He doesn't take any money for it. And he spends his time sitting by the shore waiting for a passenger. Then he takes that person across the river, takes them back. He doesn't ask for anything. In fact, he always gives them a drink from his barrel of rum that he keeps in the rowboat. But he otherwise does not take a fee from anybody. So how did this little boy, Yoshka Berkowitz, after 30 years, become Zyzik? And why does he come back to his town, the town where all the elders decided he would be the one who would be sent off to the Tsar's army? What happened to him when he was in the Tsar's army? All of that in good time. Not tonight, but in good time when you read the book, you will find out about Zyzik in the Russian army. So the night that our lead character, Fanny, decides to leave her husband and children and to go in search of her brother-in-law, she has to cross the river. And so she has Zyzik help her. And Zyzik decides he's going to join her in her pursuit. They have a wagon, they have horses, and they set out to try to find the brother-in-law. They believe he's in a certain town. They're going towards that town, and they start their journey. Nothing goes directly the way one might expect it. Let me tell you about a third character who is another part of this little group. And this third character is a chazan. He does not sing all that well. He's never had a steady job. And he loves singing. And there's only one thing that he loves more than singing, which is drinking. So in their little cart pulled by horses, they find him, Fanny, the slaughterman's daughter, and Zizek, who is in many ways her protector, they find the Chazan, whose name is Shlomo. They find him on the side of the road, dusty and dirty, and mostly asleep. He wakes up, and they decide to help him. What does he do? He tells them that he was robbed by bandits. They took everything that he had. God only knows what he had before he was robbed. And he decided to sing to them, and he started singing Adon Olam. Let me read you a passage about Shlomo the cantor. If you have this edition of the book that I'm showing you, which I bought on Amazon, this is what the book looks like, and this is on page 126. I'm sorry, 123. He's telling them his story of why he's lying in the road. The bandits asked him, "What kind of profession is that?" And he replied, "Certainly a most honorable occupation." Then they forced him to demonstrate his talents and sing for them. And to illustrate this point in his story, Shlomo Cantor launches into song for Fanny and Zizek, as he did for the bandits. Adon Olam Asher Malach. Now, there may be a different melody that he used, but I'll use that one. Enough! Zizek claps his hands and puts his hands over his ears and looks at Fanny in horror as if to say, "I'm sorry, but if Shlomo is a chazan, then Zizek is the czar." It then dawns on them why this songbird has been forced to wander destitute about the villages. He was struck by neither sunstroke nor bandits. He is simply a cantor who sings like a bar mitzvah boy whose audience prays for him to become mute. So it's just a little sample of the writing, including the sarcasm that we see in many parts of the book. So now we have in the wagon, oh, sorry, someone gave me a note. Hold up the book so we can see the cover, please. Hopefully this helps. The Slaughterman's daughter, Yaniv Iczkovits. Okay. Whoever sent that note, can you let me know if you saw it okay? Okay, beautiful. Thank you. We now have Fanny and Zizek. Fanny, the housewife and daughter of a shochet, and herself a shochet. And then we have Zizek, after 30 years in the Tsar's army. And we have Shlomo, the drunken chazan, as they go off on their journey to try to find the brother-in-law. Now, the central plot line of the story, which has many, many, many diversions, is that Fanny takes it upon herself to go in search of her sister Mendy's missing husband, bring him back to his family, as I said. And in this search, she is joined by Zizek and also by the chazan. The journey is the heart of the story. But I want to let you discover the twists and turns of the journey. And there are many twists and turns of the journey. I want to let you discover them yourself. Now, I mentioned that there are both Jews and non-Jews in the story, and a lot of the non-Jews are in the Russian police because there's a reason why they suddenly are very interested in finding people who may have committed a murder somewhere along the way. These police are both very, very effective, some of them, and some of them are like the Keystone Cops. All they can do is fall all over themselves and make a million mistakes and get the wrong idea. The real idea from these policemen is that they want to stop revolutionaries. They won't want people who are communists. They don't want people who want to end the Tsar's rule. But they will also go after petty thieves or anybody who they decide is bad. The head of the police force that we meet is someone who himself had a terrible war wound and is very, very brave and tough, but has a hard time getting around. which is all I want to say about him now. And we're also going to meet many soldiers from the Russian army. So you're going to find that this story goes from town to town, from place to place, all over the Pale of Settlement, with Jewish characters, with non-Jewish characters, with the Russian army people, with Russian police, and with our threesome, ultimately to become a foursome, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. But with Fanny and Zizek and Shlomo the Chazan. Now, every book review tries to tell you something about the story, but not too much, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. If you know something about Jewish history in the Pale of Settlement, you know that it typically was not a wonderful, happy life, and that people struggled a lot, often didn't have enough to eat, often had a hard time with Cossacks and other anti-Semites who didn't like them very much and didn't want them to have a good and happy life. And a lot of that appears in this book as well. But there's also a lot of good people in the story trying to do the right thing, whether they can or whether they can't. So besides telling you a little bit about the story, I wanted to give you an idea, as all book reviewers do, about my opinion of the story. And not only that, but I'll let you know a couple of other opinions of the story and a couple of other reviews that I have seen about this book. So my review is 4 stars out of 4. I think this is a wonderful book. It's a book that keeps you going. It is 525 pages long. So if you're going to read this book by the time Yaniv comes to speak with us at late October, get the book now. I wanted to mention that I got it on Amazon. There is now a Stymatsky. You may know if you've ever been in Israel that there's a chain of bookstores called Stymatsky's. There's a Stymatsky in LA on, I think it's on Olympic Boulevard near the Beth Jacob congregation. And they may also have this book available. But if you can, try to get a copy of it. Even if you can't read all of it, read some of it and see what the author is talking about. Because I think that it's quite wonderful. The characters will dazzle you or upset you very much. And I think the events, oh, I have a note there. They do not have the book at Stymatsky. They're not sure they will have it in store. Okay. Thank you, Terry. But like I said, I think it is available, and it may be available in other bookstores, maybe on Barnes & Noble. I don't know, but I did not have any trouble finding it on Amazon. So my review of the book is a very, very strong review, and I wanted to tell you what the New York Times had to say. And the New York Times review, if I read you the whole thing, they actually have a little more spoiler alerts than I did. But the end of the review says, it's a genuine pleasure to see all of the different strands of the story come together in the final act. And that is what happens. And the reviewer goes on to say, and I love this, if the Coen brothers ever ventured beyond the United States for their films, they would find ample material in this novel, which offers a familiar mix of dark humor and casual brutality, and an ultimately hopeful search for small comforts and a modicum of justice in an absurd and immoral world. So I think that says a lot, that who knows, maybe the Coen brothers will be coming to the weekend and then we can see them. Now someone has a note that says the shtetl where the story takes place is where her parents, grandparents were from. So yeah, I think a lot of folks on this call and a lot of folks who will come to the weekend who are Ashkenazi will definitely identify with this culture of the Pale of Settlement. Of course, that's only Ashkenazim. We have all sorts of Jews in our congregation, Israelis and people from other parts of the world, but definitely Ashkenazim will identify with this. Avi says the Kindle edition has plenty of extra copies available. Okay. Um, here's something that was in the Kirkus reviews, and I'll quote, as witty as it is wise, Iczkovits executes profoundly moving caper through the Russian Empire. So it is, I think, very funny in different places. I think that the character of Shlomo the Chazan is meant to be a funny character, and there's a lot of things that are not so light and bright in the book that are terrifying, and so sometimes it's good to have. Even Shakespeare used to have in some of his plays a funny character, even though the rest of the play was very serious. So Shlomo the Cantor will help, but other things happen in the book that you will discover. So I wanted to open this up. If anybody wants to speak, you can unmute yourself, I think you can raise your hand. How's that? Do we have a raise your hand there? No, I don't see the hand. Yeah. Okay. Michael Ozer, raise your hand. Michael, what would you like to say? Unmute yourself. Michael, are you there?
Michael, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm on my phone and I'm usually on my computer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. No, I just want to say I'm about 175 pages into the book, and I just loved the way the literature, the way that the descriptions are drawn of life in the shtetl and the way that the people that live there and the characters that he develops. They had their idiosyncrasies and their superstitions, and it was just it was so colorfully and well drawn that it just brings you back. It brings you into that life, and I love that. The other thing I would say is that the character of the army guy,
Zizek, I call him.
Zizek. I mean, he. I don't think I'm ruining anything, but they needed. He became a soldier, and then it sort of changed him as a person, uh, and uh, and my family came from Belarus, my grandparents, and the name Ozer apparently, or at least the story that I heard was that they didn't have last names, and in order to avoid conscription, one of the ways that Ozer avoided is to have a last name, and apparently Ozero is the name of a lake. They lived by a lake, and so they picked Ozer. And to see the description of what happened when somebody is picked and gets conscripted, and how they apparently changed. And now I've seen two of these people in, the innkeeper and also Zizek. It's just very well drawn, beautiful, beautiful literature, and fun to read.
Well, if you're on page 175, you have a lot of great stuff coming. So keep going, Michael. Okay, anyone else want to speak?
Bob has his hand up.
Okay, Bob. Unmute yourself. Bob, are you there?
We can't hear you, Bob.
I don't know why we can't hear him.
He's unmuted.
I know.
Bob, why don't you try to leave and come back in, and then we'll see if we can hear you.
Roseanne also would like to speak.
Roseanne, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I recently attended a fascinating talk by Sarah Benor, Professor Sarah Benor of Hebrew Union College and HUC. She's a linguistics professor who specializes in Jewish languages. And in case you thought Yiddish and Ladino were the only Jewish languages, no, there are scores of them. But anyway, the talk that she gave on that particular evening was about how Jews got their surnames. And it was fascinating to hear, first of all, that in some countries, Jews did not have surnames until the 20th century. But the reason mostly that Jews had surnames or took surnames was because the governments in the respective countries that they lived in wanted to tax them, and they needed that for the records. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Bob, did you want to try again?
Yeah, I think I got things going. Can you hear me
There you
now?
go. Yes, we can.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Now you can hear me. That's probably worse. So I was saying that I mentioned that I was reading this book to Joel when we were on a bike ride, and Joel, mentioned that, well, this was going to be the Baruch link. It was recommended to me by one of the people in my book club, who is a phenomenal reader, and he said that I would love it, and he did. We've talked a lot. I think there are a few things that came to me. One of them is that the voices and the individual characters were really distinct. It's sort of like when you go into shul on any given day, you should be able to know whether it's Kag or it's Kol or whether it's Yamin or even just by listening for a few minutes and listening to the Nusach in the same way. The voices were unique to each person, which is very difficult and particularly impressive given the fact that it was a translation. And so that I thought that the characters were not only wonderfully painted, but they had real voices. And the other thing that I thought is I judge a lot of times I judge a book by not how well they begin, but how well they end. A lot of books bring you in very well. I mean, Dickens was very good at it. Hemingway, all sorts of people are very good at the way they start books. A lot of writers, even great writers, have difficulty with the end. I thought the end was everything you would want. It was both surprising. There was a great deal of tension at the end, but it was also a redemptive sort of ending, which to me brought it to a wonderful closure and made it a very, not just an enjoyable book, but I thought a very artistic book. I mean, the guy, as we say in Book Club, boy, that guy can write the hell out of things. He's a hell of a good writer. So anyway, I thought, just again, beyond the fact that it's a subject that I think a lot of us hold dear to us, whether we're at a history in the shtetl or not, simply as a piece of writing, it's a work of art.
Yes, and I read one of the reviews that talked about bringing all of the strands of the story into one ending, which is a tremendously difficult thing to do, and he does it really well. Somebody just posted that Yaniv is very, very well known in Israel, not that well known here because he doesn't have as many books in English translation as some other Israeli writers do. One other interesting fact about Yaniv is that several years ago he signed a petition for along with some other soldiers saying, we're happy to serve in the Israeli army, but we refuse to serve on the West Bank. So there's something there as well that I'm sure we'll be able to talk to him about. over the weekend. But for me anyway, I'm much more interested in focusing on the literature than on his personal life. But I'm sure we will learn a lot more about him. He's also studied philosophy and written about philosophy, and studied at Columbia University in New York. So he's really, I'm sure, a very, very interesting fellow, and somebody I'm looking forward to hearing from. Anybody else raising their hand has anything that they'd like to talk about? Terry?
I'll just chime in and say that I heard you ask if I could speak to women being shochets. I don't think there are many shochets who are female. It takes a very long time to study to be a shochet. One of my classmates chose to do so when we were studying in Israel, with one of the rabbis who was working at the conservative yeshiva, who's kind of known for teaching the halacha around becoming a shochet. I don't know any females in my own life who are shochets, and I know very few. I know you're going to all make jokes about me making this comparison, but there are very few who are mohelets. It's the same. A person who often teaches the halacha of being a shochet often also teaches the halacha of being a moil, and including this teacher who I was mentioning from the conservative yeshiva, because there are comparisons in terms of how you do a cut halachically, whether obviously in terms of circumcision or it's in terms of killing an animal to consume. So I think there's something to be said for, having a squeamish stomach. That's not to say that men have a stronger stomach than women, but I think in history, that was definitely the case, that it was kind of a male profession, and because it was dirty and gross and all those kinds of things, all the stereotypes you might guess as to why, but also because it takes a lot of time, and it's not necessarily the kind of job that you can always do at the same time. As Joel was mentioning before from the book, people might just show up to your house with a chicken and say, I need this for tonight. And you don't get to decide when it's not like going to, the rabbi's daughter now in our neighborhood, right? To be able to say, oh, I'm going to just pick up a piece of meat. This was just a 24/7, I guess not 24/7, 24/6 job in terms of needing to be on. So I think also back in the day, that wasn't as easy for women stereotypically who were caring for a household. So I don't know the statistics in 2023, but I myself know a few male shochets and no female shochets. So using my own stats, it seems like there are very few women.
Yeah. I just read that the Israelis have in the army an elite combat unit, and for the first time, a woman soldier is now going to be part of that unit. So I think little by little, things change.
For sure.
We would not have had Rabbi Schatz as our rabbi 100 years ago. So
right.
Things change, and I think very much for the better. Someone wants to know how we chose, how our committee chose this particular author. Terry, did you want to talk about that?
Sure. We polled the committee to come up with authors that they had either been reading or were potentially had heard about and were interested in. And we had a whole group of authors, and we did research on each of those authors, and we presented it to the whole committee. And then basically the whole committee ranked the authors by what they thought would be an interest level for the weekend. And we came up with our top list. And that's how we did it. Joel, may I also ask a question at this point? Okay. Would you comment a bit about how our author used that very interesting periodical that was published with letters by widows, by women searching for their lost husbands, etc. And how do you think that played in with the movement forward of the book, of the action in the book?
I want to answer that question in a moment, but I also just want to say with full disclosure what happened with our committee. Our committee had decided that for our second annual Baruch Link Scholar in Residence program, we would invite Meir Shalev, the Israeli author, to be our guest. And he had written many, many wonderful books and a very favorite author of mine. And as you may know, Meir Shalev passed away this past year. So we contacted his agent, and his agent said, well, I don't know, he's not well. Don't know if he'd be able to make the trip to Los Angeles. And of course he wasn't well, and he passed away. But we thought that we had a wonderful second choice in Yaniv, and someone on the committee, I don't even remember who it was, said, well, I know of this great author, and I think he would be terrific. And I had not heard of him, but now he is certainly very high up on my list. Now, to Terry's question, this is on the very, very first page of the book. This is the way the book opens. The book opens with a passage from this newsletter called Hamagid, the person who tells the story. Oh, this is Thursday, Adar 2nd, 5654, or February 8th, 1894. The Cry of a Miserable Woman. That's the title of the article. I implore the honorable readers to pity me, a lonely and despondent woman, because my husband has left me and our 3 healthy children during Passover, just 5 years after our marriage. As he was making his way to Pinsk to earn our bread, he sent for me and I followed him until Sukkot. Now he has vanished without a trace. And I was told that he was seen in a hotel in Minsk, and later he was spotted in a railway carriage bound for Kiev. Whereas I am left with nothing, dispirited and beleaguered, stripped of my possessions, penniless, with no one to come to my aid. And it goes on, but I won't read the whole passage, but you can see what a wonderful imagination the writer has, imagining he's this woman writing this letter. And of course, one of our characters, Mendy, is reading this and feeling so sad for this person. And then the exact same thing happens to her. So I think this is certainly a theme of people leaving. Zizek leaves, not by his own choice, and he's away from the town for 30 years. Fanny, of course, leaves her family to go look for Mendy's husband, and I think it was not really uncommon in those days. Some people went to America, and maybe they sent for their family, and maybe they didn't, and maybe they made a new family. So I don't think it was uncommon at all, but it's something that the book revolves around, is the story of constant movement, and certainly the 3 characters, which ultimately become 4 characters, trying to find the lost or the husband who abandoned his family, are examples of what may have happened once before. You could see it as some kind of a metaphor. I don't know. I think it's actually something that just really happened. And I'm sure that when Yaniv wrote this book, he knew that there were situations like this, and he thought that they would make good literature. He knew that there were young Jewish boys who were captured by the Tsar's army and didn't come back for 30 years. So he knew that all these things actually happened. Whether they happened in the way that they happened in this book, of course, well, that's a little bit of a different story. Well,
Remy has a question.
Remy, please.
Hey everyone. So I just wanted to say I'm in the middle of this book, really enjoying it. But I wanted to say, as far as the book, in the beginning, there's this there's a map. And I don't know if you get that if you're reading it online, if you're getting the online version, because it's the journey of Fanny Keisman and Zizek Breshev, and it actually shows all the places. And for me, I'm a visual learner or visual reader as well. It was really helpful to see like where they were, where everybody is, and it takes like 2 pages at the beginning of the book to show their whole journey. So I just want to mention that if you want to, if that's important to you to care about, where it's all located, the geography of it. That's it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I found myself going back to this map
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it. I don't know if it's on the online version.
That I don't know.
So I'm just saying that if you want to see where the characters are, it definitely is in the book. And it's very helpful. That's my little plug. Thank you, Joel.
Okay. Anyone else would like to talk? Okay. Well, as I said, I like the book. And all the people who are either in the middle of reading it who spoke, and Bob, who has finished the book, spoken, I also think really, really enjoyed it. So I commend it to you. But as I said at the beginning, that's only part of why we're doing this, is to let you hear about the book. But we certainly want to encourage everyone to go from here to registering for the Scholar in Residence weekend, where you'll have a chance to hear. This is, and for those of you who did not go to the first weekend, this is how we do it. We begin on Friday night with a beautiful Friday night dinner, and the guest artist speaks a little bit at the dinner. And I think Rabbi Kligfeld is going to have a little Q&A with Yaniv, and my guess is one of the questions he will ask is, my question is, how is an Israeli in the 21st century attracted to writing about this story? And I'm sure we'll hear something interesting from Yaniv and about his other interests, which include philosophy, and as someone mentioned in the chat, writing about Wittgenstein. So quite an interesting fellow. Also, I wanted to tell you we have 2 more sessions. There'll be a Shabbat lunch with the author, and during that lunch he will be engaged with Danielle Berlin, formerly with the Jewish Journal, and a very, very bright and interesting person, and she will have a good dialogue with the author. And then on Sunday morning, we'll have a brunch with the author. So lots of opportunities to hear about him, hear about the book, hear other people interview him, and ask questions about the book. So I do encourage you to register, and if you have any friends, family who you think would be interested, ask them to register, because the committee has worked hard, and we really hope this is going to be a very, very successful time. And you're gonna, if you meet this guy who can write like this, boy, it'll be great to meet. So, Rabbi Schatz, did you want to have anything in conclusion?
Audrey has a question or a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just I went last year. It was fabulous, and so I haven't read this book yet, but it was so interesting and well done, and so I would highly recommend it. And then also sometimes on audiobooks they'll have like an appendix thing that you can click on, and sometimes it'll have some of the visual additions to a book.
Okay.
Like a map, or or a reference or something like that. I know, Avia, you said that you downloaded it. I don't know if you started it yet on Audible.
Calling out Avi.
Okay, I don't know if you started it and saw that if they had like an appendix or something with the map, because the map's a great idea. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I tried to look. I was trying to look on the Audible, but I just bought it literally just before this call started. So I haven't had a chance to explore it yet. But.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got back from the East Coast, so I'm kind of a mess and following my dog around. So I apologize for having my
I wish I could hear the audible that when the Chazan is singing, I don't know Lam. So.
We'll have to have Wanda send us a recording.
I'm glad I can't hear it. Actually.
Joel,
yes.
Joel, I'd like to make a comment about last year's event. I had every intention of reading the book as I do this year, and I still have every intention of reading the book from last year's author. But I thought that the program was fantastic last year, and you didn't really need to read the book. It was just fascinating picking up on it. And this, what you're doing, what you, Terry, and Rabbi Schatz are doing with this is kind of the same thing. It's like, I'm completely fascinated. I have all the good intentions of the world of reading this book, but if I don't, I've really enjoyed this, and I hope I can make it to LA and enjoy the weekend too, because last year's weekend was phenomenal, even without reading the book.
Well, thanks, Avi. I really do appreciate that. And I would say that I think you could come to this weekend either not having started but not finished the book, or not having read the book at all, and you will find a fascinating conversation. Certainly those of you on this chat already know something about the book. You know when it takes place. You know what the basic storyline is, although you certainly don't know all the jigs and jags of this story, which is really quite remarkable. Like when the three of them find themselves in the middle of a Russian army camp. But I'm not going to go into that right now. But there are many amazing things that happen in the story, but I still think you would enjoy it. And you can certainly tell people, I know it's intimidating to read a 500-page book, but I think you can enjoy it. As Avi said, our author last year, Dorit Rabignon, wrote a lovely novel about a love affair between a Jewish woman, an Israeli woman, and an Arab man, and very, very interesting, and certainly very topical. And I think that you could certainly attend this even if you hadn't read the book. But I encourage everybody to read the book, or at least as much as you possibly can between now and October 27th. Anyone final comments from anyone else? Rabbi Schatz, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I'll give Terry the last word if she wants it, but I'll just share that she doesn't. So I'll take it. But what I'm going to unspotlight you just for a second. So if
okay, sure.
There we go. Hello, everyone. But I just want to say that one of the things that Baruch really endorsed and practiced as a teacher was that you would come into his class and he would expect you to be prepared for sure, but he would also just want you to come to learn. And I think that what Avi was saying is something really special about Baruch. That yes, of course, he would have wanted you to be prepared and would love for you to have read the book so that you could ask questions on that level. But in order to really live out his legacy, I think there's something special about also just being in the presence of learning and being able to be at this weekend, which is really so full of high-level learning and excitement for literature and poetry. And we get to hear Baruch through his poetry throughout the weekend. And it's just a feel-good weekend. I know that that's not... we want every weekend at Beth Am to be a feel-good weekend, but this is really the kind of weekend that allows you to feel as though we are celebrating someone who gave so much to education and to literature and to our community. So I hope, if for no other reason, you will join us for that, because not only does he deserve it, but it really will uplift you and uplift your mind and your soul by being part of it. So we hope to see you. I'll put the link again in the chat. It's right there. And we hope you can come to something, anything. There's scholarship for those of you who would like it or know someone else who will need it. We want anybody to be there who can be there. So please register. And it looks like Rabbi Lemley has a question. So let's see what she has to say. Are you there, Susan? Okay.
She's still muted.
Yeah.
No way.
Okay. Erev Tov, everyone. Hopefully we will hear from Rabbi Lemley soon. And hope you all have a great night. Gemar Chatima Tova. If I do not see you before.
Unmute.
Oh,
did that work?
Okay. Here you are.
I just wanted to add all of what you said. I found last year tremendously fun and interesting and stimulating. It was at such a high intellectual and cultural level. And another real benefit, I don't need to tell everyone how hard it is to talk about Israel and to experience all that we're going through about Israel these days. This is a context in which we get to talk about Israel in a fairly, what should we say? It's a common denominator way. It's an inclusive way. It's a non-divisive way. And everything sort of worked out And where do we get that? So I think as from a Zionist Israel direction, it's also a tremendously valuable thing to do. So I'm really, really looking forward to it this year. And I hope that, and I think it didn't make a difference whether you read, I can't remember whether I read the book before or after. You read the book, it's great to read the book, but I think and I can see already from the way the weekend is set up, it's set up around big issues and big approaches. And if you read the book, it'll just amplify it within you. But if you haven't read the book, I think you'll enjoy it every bit as much. So I just wanted to add yet another encouragement.
Yes, a beautiful encouragement, and you're spot on. So thank you for adding that as well. And Gemar Chatima Tova, everyone. Hopefully we will see you at Yom Kippur services, but also we'll see you for the weekend. So have a great month until then. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.